So here's my view. I think if you ask me how the 2022 has been, I think it's been a great year for all the marketeers. Okay, with all the hashtags. So I call this, the year of hashtags, literally, because you saw things like hashtag moonlighting, hashtag great resignation, hashtag silent quitting, hashtag work from home, hybrid, etc., etc. I don't know, to my mind, some of these were quite old wine, new bottles, because, things like silent quitting have always been there. So you just give a nice little fancy term to it, and then you say, well, this is happening. And it definitely helps in grabbing eyeballs. But other than that, I think there's some interesting stuff that's happening. I think the jury is still out on hybrid, okay, or the work from home piece. A lot of organizations are possibly going through this challenge where the leaders are expecting to get the pre-COVID, policies, etc., back in system, but the workforce is not allowing that. A lot of people are saying that now it's becoming a norm that you have to have a work from home. If you don't have a work from home, acquisition becomes a challenge, branding is not proper, so on and so forth. So I think there is a split vote there that so how do we go from here? How do we look at hybrid? How we look at work from home? So that's kind of emerged out of the 2022. I think we also saw some interesting stuff. We saw a lot of companies talk about intelligent automation through AI. In 2022, we saw a whole lot of talk around skills, COE. I don't know if you would want to do a deep dive. That's one of my favorite subjects, which is all about net scraping for skills and all of that. And there were some evils. Okay, there are some evils that we were not able to get rid of. And this is something that I've been, discussing with my other HR colleagues. I think a lot of us are still suffering from things like disparate systems. Despite all the talk on HR tech and stuff like that, but we still have disparate systems where data is broken, connectedness doesn't exist, user experience is not seamless. We still have challenges of data security. We have created an IT infrastructure which is not really keeping in mind things like, how is your PII data being secured? And sooner than later, I mean, India too will have its own form of a GDPR, and that's the time when there'll be a lot of work to do. We still haven't been able to get rid of the legacy systems, the evils of the legacy systems. We struggle with that. A lot of our core HR systems are extremely, clunky, and that affects the employee experience to a very large extent. Our adoption and utility for systems, processes, tools, etc., has been low. So I think there's been a challenge there, which we are still trying to address. We haven't really moved forward. But in very subdued terms, okay, not like big noise was made, but I think 2022 also saw a lot of leaders talk about things like metaverse and blockchain and employee experience redesign, adaptive workforce, asking to listening, personalization, hyper-personalization, and then ESG, sustainability. And then, of course, my favorite, which is organization network analysis. A lot of these are very disruptive for HR in terms of, and this is not tech that I'm talking about. This is like everything that happens around HR, whether it's a practice or a policy or a technology. So these are disruptive in nature. And I think going forward, they are pivotal to make HR future ready. If HR professionals don't make these a part of the next year's people strategy, they will be witnessing a Kodak moment for sure. So that's how I would summarize, for you, Rashmi, the 22 and the 23. I think it's exciting times, guys. I mean, it's going to get extremely challenging for the uninitiated, but the people who have laid down their foundations well, it's going to become extremely exciting. The opportunity is huge. And a lot of this stems, what I'm going to talk about next, a lot of this stems from, what we have observed in 22, the challenges that we have observed in 22. So I think improving the workforce planning, okay, to better inform, let's say, the buy, build, borrow strategies, that's going to be at the center stage for everything talent acquisition. So it's not going to be just an external looking function to say that, okay, here is a role, let's scout. I think a lot of this is going to be driven from the leaders to say, what of these roles follow the buy and what of these roles follow the build, and which of these are borrow, and borrow is quite near to gigs, which of these are borrow roles. Your workforce planning literally is going to start from there. Okay. And this is not going to happen like, overnight. It's going to be a long journey in itself. Internal mobility is going to take a front seat. And I think that's a big trend that a lot of us have been, kind of observing for some time. So when you talk of internal mobility, traditionally, this has always been about looking at IJPs, and then the route to IJP has been tenure, longevity in the organization, and performance rating. I think other than just looking at these factors, some new data variables or the new data sets that will get introduced to take those decisions are going to be around the skills and the learning journeys. Remote work, okay, that's a trend to watch out for. As I started saying that, the jury is still out, but remote work or work from anywhere is going to be at the center stage of flexibility. And since I bring up flexibility, I think just one important stat that should set the tone is to say, this word flexibility, okay, I did some research on a paper and I saw the 363% increase in mention of just this term flexibility in the job descriptions over the last 1.5 to 2 years. So what does that mean? That a lot of organizations have started inserting flexibility as a key component of their EVPs, through their job description. So clearly there is a recognition to say that the workforce today is expecting that kind of flexibility. However, this flexibility is not just about remote working. Flexibility is also about, internal movements, lattice, agile, planned, etc. So that's going to be another one, that how do you configure flexibility in your organization, starting from remote working, moving on to, internal movements. The third trend that I think is always been there, but I think it will amplify this year because there are a lot of solutions, which is the use of intelligent automation. And I would like to, kind of classify automation as a separate entity and intelligent automation as a separate one, to say that, when you think of automation, you think of things like, how do I make my repetitive tasks, kind of go auto, so things like CV parsing and all of those are standard features that you get any which ways. But the intelligent automation is where you have products like, or capabilities like, if I rolled out a job today in the organization to say that this is a role that I'm hiring, is there a way to dive in or deep dive into the LinkedIn network of one of my employees, okay, and see which are the potential matches in that employee's network and throw that data back to the employee and to the recruiter, right? And this is possible today through organization network analysis and many other, scraping exercises. So I think that's going to be the core this year, that how do you really move ahead of automation and bring intelligence into the system? And talking of intelligence, I think the fourth key, trend, which you possibly have already observed, is this whole business of predictive analytics. Okay, and I say that today you have models available, and something that I very frequently, aggressively use is the ability to predict the quality of hire and ability to predict the performance of the hire that I have shortlisted, in the sense the candidate that I have shortlisted. So there are models available which help you ascertain that, if you are going to make an offer out to a person, what is the, what is the prediction around his performance? Is this person going to be rising in the organization or going to be a static resource, and so on and so forth, and accurate up to about 80% to 85% kind of practice. So there are those kind of data use cases that are going to emerge, which recruiters would be using. And then, of course, the diversity and inclusion. We talk about it, okay, but I don't know whether you know this or not, but a lot of stats say that currently only 1 in 3 recruiters track things like diversity of candidates. Okay, so it's still not center stage in a recruiter's, KPIs or hiring metrics. But I think this year is going to be one of those game changer ones for diversity, and diversity in itself is going to see a lot of change, to say that we are not just looking at the gender diversity, we're looking at a whole lot of other elements, whether it's the LGBTI or it's about, PWD and the others. So those are going to happen. And then, of course, the battle of the old guard versus the new guard, right? So you'll see a lot of Gen Zs emerging and coming at roles that you would typically have parked for the others. And when the Gen Zs come, is your organization ready? That's a different challenge. But you will see that, more and more of your talent is going to be Gen Z coming going forward. Now, if that happens, then I think the Gen Z's expectations are also going to be a little different from a millennial. For example, I know Gen Z rejects, long job descriptions. I'm just going very tactical and basic here to say that even very long 2-3 pages of a job description where it is written not in first person, the second or third person English, saying the candidate should be so-and-so, whereas Gen Z expects you to talk to that person through that document, that you are so and so. So those small little nuances are now being realized. Okay, and then there, of course, there are tools to smartly configure job descriptions, etc. And then where do you post your jobs? I mean, if you're not on Instagram, if you're not on the social media to attract Gen Z, then I think you lost the game. And last but not the least, okay, just talking about trends, I think you'll also see a lot of our recruiters transforming from recruiters into business leaders. And I know a lot of us who are in this webinar today will not like the next statement, but would agree deep down in their hearts that a lot of recruiters are almost like, they're considered like order takers. You are given a certain mandate and then you have to go fulfill it. So I keep saying, as of now, recruiters are definitely considered order takers, but no more. Okay. In the coming time, I think recruiting will increasingly be recognized as a strategic role. I mean, the recruiting leaders and recruiters per se, they will be expected to bring a lot of perspective into the role, into the shortlists, into the process, and pushback and then lead forward. So all of these are going to be extremely important, and therefore there is definitely going to be a need for recruiters to be a little more creative, a little more always wear the business hat, and anticipating the needs and then using the right system. So I think my intent, Rashmi, here has been that, I don't want to talk too much about what you can find on Google, through your keyword searches, but talk about something which is more meaningful and possibly not, being observed and or being read about in the journal publications. So yeah, I mean, these to my mind would kind of be the trends that I think are going to emerge going forward. Okay, I'm going to give you two simple ones, and then I'm going to spend time on one best practice, which I think nobody's talking about it, and it pains me a lot that why are we not really, building our capability around that. So the simple ones are, of course, I think something that we'll have to now understand and realize is that given the kind of workforce or the multi-generations that we deal with, we'll have to do a lot of proactive candidate engagement. What that means is that, traditionally you have looked at scouting or they're candidates who are not actively hiring, looking out, they're passive candidates. And then you try to reach out to them, you try to create a small little funnel of yours, and then, stay connected, at the right time hire them. But you've done this exercise pretty much at only C level or, the senior exec level. I think going forward, because of the kind of dearth of talent, let's say, but at the same time, there is a talent out there, but we just don't know which is the right talent. So it's about, fitting the right person for the right role. So you'll have to get into a lot of proactive candidate engagement. I think that's going to be something which people will have to bring as, a part or parcel of their day and day. And the second simple one is more about data, to say that how are you using, analytics and predictive analytics to, as I said earlier, to identify which are the right guys that you need to kind of go ahead and make offers to. But other than that, I think there's something that we should be investing on, not in terms of just money, but also in terms of the sheer, intelligence that an HR practitioner brings. And then this is the whole business around skills COE. Now, just to give you a quick sense on what this skills COE is, and then I'll tell you how it impacts, recruitment processes. Skills COE is a study. It's an external study. So, for example, you have job descriptions, right? A lot of your job descriptions already have a lot of skills written onto them to say that these are the skills that you need. Now, what you can do now going ahead is that you can take those job descriptions and the skills written on those job descriptions, and then create a comparator basket to say that for a, let's say, for example, HRBP role, I want to benchmark and see that what are the competitor companies and in multiple geographies asking for, okay? And through a lot of net scraping, you can fetch information to say that which are the skills that your competitors and the others are asking, and not just skills, but even classified skills to say that which are the adjacent skills, which are the declining skills, which are the emerging skills for the same role. Once you get a skill inventory like that, then you kind of choose and you reconstruct your job description to make it more relevant. The other big advantage of this is that you are also identifying something known as adjacent skill. So you as a recruiter or even a system might be rejecting a certain CV because they do not find the right keyword there. Because that skill is narrated in our business, for example, let's say, autoclave. But when you do a study like this, you realize that you may not be getting autoclave, but ionization is as good. I'm just giving you some examples. They may not mean anything, but there could be another alternate skill to that. And that helps the recruiter, identify the CVs, even if those keywords are not visible there. But then the other thing that you get is a solid success profile, which is absolutely relevant, with emerging and the new age skills. And then when you go out and you find candidates which are, kind of mapping to that, then your quality of hire kind of increases. So I think, and there are many such use cases, and the skills COE business just keeps going deep and deep. One only needs to imagine the kind of, net scraping that you can do. Not just skills, you can also net scrape that for every one little skill, what is the wage that should be paid? So you can map a skill to a wage, and that helps you construct the complete, compensation structure and not go wrong with an offer. So there are many such things that recruiters would possibly or should possibly be using as best practices. And these are not new age, fancy science fiction terms. These are realities. Organizations are using it. There is a vendor that I'm speaking to who we have brought in, and we are, kind of building our own skills COE. And I speak to them, and they say they've got more than 250 odd, skills COE installations in India itself. So what I just spoke to you is a reality. So I think pretty much this is how, you could make your processes and empower recruitment as a function. I think HR leaders have understood that even before we get into strategy, they just have to change a mindset, and they've understood that HR is not equal to HR anymore. HR is equal to tech, is equal to marketing. And if an HR cannot demonstrate tech and marketing side by side, you are not ready for the future. And there are many examples. Okay, I mean, let's talk about tech. I mean, everything that I've spoken about, you would have seen that, there is a recruitment practice that I talk about, and at the same breath, I talk about a tech, which kind of enables this. But then there is a marketing angle to it, and that is so relevant for all recruiters. Just for example, I spoke about Gen Z, okay, and I said that, where are you getting the Gen Zs from? So if you do not have the right, visibility on Glassdoors, on Instagram, on many of these other channels, you possibly are not appealing to those people. And that's basically a marketing, skill set that you need to have. The other is that traditional marketing practices, when I say traditional, I'm not saying old school, but, basic marketing practices are now being applied in HR. And a classic example of that is employee experience journey maps. Okay, where personas are created in an organization, and they basis those personas, experience journey maps are created, and then it is identified that what do you need to do better. Design thinking sits at the heart of it. And where does that come from? It doesn't come from HR. Design thinking is about, creating those empathy maps, and how do you, innovate in an organization. These are all, key mindset shifts that one needs to have. Only then you can build the right strategy. And talking about the right strategy and then what, HR leaders are going to adopt, I think, as I said, they are going to adopt tech and marketing in a much bigger way. I know of HR leaders who are now clearly, putting up in their job descriptions that even an HR VP needs to come with, tech jobs. I know some, organizations which are asking for recruiters who understand Python. Not that they have to hire Python, but there is some amount of data that they need to work on, and that doing analytics around that data needs Python. Python, by the way, is the easiest coding language. So those are some of the things that are coming up. But on the strategy side, as I said, you will see a huge amount of conversations around skills. And we spoke about a use case to say, how does it impact talent acquisition? But let me also tell you how it impacts talent management. Today, from a talent management point of view, you would all know that after performance management, process is over, there's a rating with a very devilish bell curve, which is, kind of put into place. And then you come up with some cases to say, okay, these guys go through an increment cycle. And some of these are also taken through a, promotion or a progression. Now, if you've sat through some of these promotion and the other conversations, you would know that they only happen on the following factors. That how long has the person been in the organization? Okay, tick mark. Has this person been given a top rating for the last 1 or 2 or 3 years, whatever is the organization guideline? Tick mark. And then there is a lot of intuitiveness and gut feels, okay, which is optics, that what does the manager think? And therefore you make a, you float a God syndrome in the manager, okay? Basis these 3 factors, more or less a decision is made, okay? Yes, you could disagree with me, no, Vikas, we also do things like, projects and coaching and all of that, but just go into each of these. the final output or a successful output of a lot of these is still in the hand of a manager, right? So I think a lot of HR leaders have tried to, kind of break this whole bias, and they have started saying that let's also add something known as a skills data. Okay, to say that, and these are not competencies, these are not soft skills that I'm talking about. These are hardcore functional skills. Okay, so you'll never find in a skills framework thing like communication skill. Okay, it's universal. These are skills which are directly impacting your work and can be measured. So you will not find decision making, because it's very difficult to measure decision making in the skills framework. So assume that every role has a 5 to 10 such skills mapped to that unique job role, and those 10 skills have a learning journey associated to it, to say that for this particular micro skill, this is the micro-sized learning program that you need to do. And because this person, let's say Vikas, has done that course, has done an assessment, self-assessment or whatever, the score on this skill for Vikas is 80%. And the overall score for this candidate is about 90% for the current role, 80% for the aspired role. Now you go with this data in that promotion conversation and speak to that to the manager and say, hey, listen, I think this guy is well within watermark levels or above. It's an 80% and above score. Let's promote this person. Then it makes more sense, okay, rather than just going through a gut feel. So I think this whole business of skills center of excellence is one of the key items in every HR leader's strategy map for the next year. Predictive and prescriptive. So we've talked about predictive. I spoke about a few use cases, but there's also prescriptive now. And that's where a lot of work is now happening. A lot of organizations are investing money that how can you predict, and not just predict, but also give an action around that prediction. So the easiest use case is for a sales professional, right? Imagine every morning, a sales rep gets a message on the or a nudge on the mobile to say that your daily run rate for today is 100 rupees. The prediction is that you will, given your funnel and everything, you'll be about 80%, which is 80 rupees. So you're short on 20. Now the action that you are, what the system would suggest is, one of your friends, okay, Rashmi, she works in Haryana and she's got 3 extra leads, but her daily run rate is, going to be met. She's on a buffer. So you could speak to Rashmi, take those leads, and possibly convert them for your own business. Now, this is a classic case of how HR systems and business systems come together, and then business is adding or unlocking value, or sorry, HR is unlocking value for business. So that's the kind of work that's going to happen. And I call this the enterprise performance management. So these 2-3 themes are going to be center stage for the strategies for the HR leaders next year. Right. So I have a very firm and a very radical view on this. I think the traditional learning and development doesn't work anymore. More and more people have started, divorcing the 8-hour and the 2-day and a 3-day programs. A lot of business leaders have also started questioning that, does this really work? So that's why you see a lot of academies being created, and academy is not just the concept has been there for a while, but the kind of academy that I talk about is the one where business owns that function. Okay, HRs don't own that function. All right. So if you have a merchandising, as a department, or in our case, if you have manufacturing as a department, then manufacturing owns the academy, because the focus is on skills again. It is not on, other stuff. It is not on things that you can't measure. It is on hardcore skills which impact productivity. And that can be best, delivered, controlled, monitored, etc., by the business. So what is the role of an L&D here? The role of an L&D here is to curate and design the framework. All right. It's not to lead that show. So I think L&D has to reinvent itself to say, how many more academies can I create? And you can create academies as per department, or you can create academies as per themes, or as per, the key objectives of an organization. So if your organization is getting onto the digital transformation bandwagon, you possibly need a digital transformation academy to drive that entire engine. Again, this academy is not just about training. It's about, the labs that you run, which you call the innovation labs, or the kind of projects that you do. So all of this is a part of an academy. So the whole ecosystem of L&D in itself has to, kind of transform, and it is transformed in a lot of organizations. The other piece is that, I think more and more HR professionals are looking at wiring their HR journeys around the KPI. Now, stay with me on this. What's happening at the end of the day, when you give an offer out, when the contract is signed, what does that contract mean? There are only two objectives. One is that the employee or the potential employee has to deliver, on the objectives, which is basically a goal sheet, which is nothing but a KPI. The second is that the employer has to ensure that the employee grows, okay, the growth of the employee. These are the two core objectives. That is how the contract is kind of constructed. Now, at the end of the day, if KPI is the center stage for all of this, then can you wire all your HR journeys just on that KPI? Now, again, a use case. I'm a man of use cases. Otherwise, it's all 30,000 feet in the air. Imagine if you're an HR VP, or if you're an L&D head, or you're a sales guy. Sales examples are easy to understand, and your KPIs have been consistently, dropping on sales performance. Can the system on its own nudge you back to say that when I look at your performance, I mean, it's not saying it like that, but system is actually intelligently reading that this sales professional is excellent on the opening of a call, of a sales call, because the first few calls, it's always good. And the feedback is to say that, well, we will move forward. But during the objection handling and the closing or the negotiations is where, you tend to have a higher leakage compared to the other peers around you. So the system intelligently identifies that because your KPIs are dropping at a level of commercial close, therefore a program, which could be a micro-sized learning program, or a check-in by a manager, or a peer-to-peer connect just on negotiations and closing. Can that be organized through the system through a nudge without any manual intervention? Now, that's the kind of learning journeys that L&D strategists and HR leaders are now creating. And you keep thinking, similarly, if the KPI levels are going up, in the sense you're performing and overperforming, can a reward and recognition journey be, kicked in? And so on and so forth. So there are many, many use cases, but how do you wire everything around, KPIs in HR is I think a problem that everybody, or rather, an opportunity that everybody is trying to see. And that's how systems are getting designed for driving L&D. Sorry, you've touched a very raw nerve of mine, because I keep seeing a lot of things around diversity, but then when I do deep dives and I figure that, we're just counting numbers. And I keep saying that diversity is about counting numbers, yes, but inclusion is about making those numbers count. So it's not enough to say that I hired 50% women workforce. I think what you also have to do, and that's actually not even a start point now. It was a start point probably 2 years back when people had just started talking about DEI. But hey, we move forward. Today, I think what we really need to focus on is that how many of those 50% that you hired are actually included, all right? I can give you horror stories around this. Definitely not in my organization, because I think we've done a fantastic job on ensuring that inclusion is at the center stage and not just numbers of diversity. But I think there are a lot of organizations who would resonate with me when I say this, that, PWD hiring, for example, is just a number there. It's just a statistic. You go and speak to that PWD candidate, and the candidate would tell you that I wish they had given me a little more work. I'm just like a fancy, statistic out there just to say that, okay, we are also doing PWD hiring. So I think when you talk about strategies to promote DIB, I think first, of course, is a mindset change, that what does diversity, inclusion, belongingness really mean to you as an organization? All right. If you're hiring women workforce, and I can tell you from personal example, okay, my daughter, she's in the 12th grade, okay, and she keeps telling me, why are companies, promoting so much about hiring women? I said, yeah, because they want to hire women, they want to have an equal opportunity. She said, then just have an equal opportunity, hire on merit, women will come, just ensure that you're not giving them less money as compared to anybody else, or less roles and responsibility as compared to anybody else. So one has to really think about how this new generation, and rather a lot of us, are thinking. We do not like to be stereotyped. We do not like to be tagged. You ask an LGBTI, do you like to be tagged? They don't care. They're like, listen, I mean, we have entered the organization, give us work. Don't tag us saying that, oh, you are LGBTI. Wow, I'm going to treat you differently. The last thing they want is that. So how have you created the ecosystem to include the people? Okay, so that's going to be at the core of your initiative. So things like, if you're doing conscious and unconscious trainings inside your organization, Don't start from managers. Start from the security guards. Start from the receptionists, because that's where things break. If you're doing consciousness or conscious bias and unconscious bias trainings, don't do it only for women or only for men. Do it for all of them together in the same room. Okay, don't have targeted training programs. The second is have some targets, but make those targets count. Use technology to identify where inclusion is happening. Don't go by managers' feedback. And there are tools. I don't know if you've heard of organizational network analysis. ONA is a tech which helps you identify that in your organization, which people are included and which are not. Now, how does this happen? It happens through a whole lot of data, data play. And so basically, it's all about collaboration, right? So there's a tech which goes and sits in your HRIMS system, into your mail exchange servers. They do a lot of NLP and semantic searches to understand that how does communication happen, and out comes a report to say that, women are not included or are included in so-and-so team, but not included in so-and-so team. So you get those kind of diagnostics. Believe those diagnostics, don't believe what you hear from the managers. So I think these are some key initiatives. And last but not the least, please address pay, gender, and other equity gaps. Okay, we don't acknowledge this, but a lot of us know. I mean, that was one of the first things that we started doing here when we started talking about diversity, that how do I ensure that there is equity all across? Do a role-based diversity push if you want to, okay? That's completely up to you as an organization. But do create the infrastructure. In the absence of the right washrooms, the right physical infrastructure, you are not doing much by just hiring, a diversity or a PWE candidate. So those are some very basic but very important initiatives that a lot of organizations are still struggling with, and they are investing monies on. So I think that's how we want to do this. I mean, I don't know, it's become a big thing now. I think I created my avatar on Second Life in 2006. That was the first advent of metaverse, okay? And I didn't know what to do with it. I was so lost. I was like, okay, created an avatar, was playing with that thing for about a month or two, and then I just quit it. The reason why a lot of people did not hold on to that version of metaverse was because it wasn't so fancy looking, okay? The data and the bandwidth wasn't really helping. Today, what you have is that you have much better graphics, and a much better wireframe and frameworks per se to run a metaverse in an organization. So the use cases in HR at this point in time, the ones that are successful, okay, I mean, there are many use cases, by the way. I mean, you can replace literally everything in the metaverse, but that sounds good. I'm not sure whether we are ready to replace everything that happens in a real life onto a metaverse. I know people are hating, there are a lot of people who are hating working from home. They're saying, I wish I was going to the office. I think I was more productive in the office. At the same time, there are people who are saying, I don't want to go to the office. I'm better off at home. It's very contextual, right? So metaverse kind of solves for the other lot, okay? So some interesting use cases which have emerged and are doing well, I think, are on the talent acquisition space. So a lot of these, virtual tours that you would do, typically using 2D graphics and all of that, metaverse is a much, much better version. And metaverse actually gives you the capability that it's not just a standard, plain vanilla, static kind of a virtual tour which has been pre-recorded. If you create the right avatars using AI, you can do live conversations in a metaverse. So imagine if you're doing a virtual tour for our company, if we had a metaverse, and you saw that there is in the metaverse, you saw there's a CHRO cabin that you just moved around. You could actually walk into that room, okay, and talk to the CHRO for a few minutes, okay? And now you must be wondering, is this live? No, this is not live. This is all a bot which has been trained, okay, over a period of whatever, 6-8 months to a year to handle different kind of questions. And it also learns on its own with more and more such interactions. So you could do those kind of experience tours. Rather than calling them virtual tours, I call them experience tours. So that's one kind of a use case. The other kind of use case is on sheer interviews, okay? And we know, we've done these interviews in and out. A lot of recruiters would resonate with me when I say that you even know when the candidate is going to ask a question, you know what that person means. And you also know the follow-up question that the candidate is going to ask. Now, if that intelligence could be transferred into a metaverse, what you could be potentially doing is giving a great interview experience to a candidate using the metaverse. So look at metaverse as a replacement to a certain sense of the physical interaction. But it is meaningless if you're not using AI here, if you're not using bots here, if you're not creating avatars here, and if you're not simulating different kind of experiences. The third use case is, of course, virtual collaboration. For example, what we are doing right now. This could be done beautifully on a metaverse with all your attendees sitting there, and you would actually feel that, you will feel their presence. And yeah, I mean, it's just a better way to do things. But then if you add the cost to this, okay, then you look at how many of the cities are 5G enabled, because a lot of new metaverse companies that are coming up, they do not have the kind of experience that metaverse has promised. And please be careful about who do you empanel for building your own metaverse. The real technology of metaverse is still expensive, okay? The graphics, the whole experience, it takes a lot of thinking, a lot of money. It possibly takes about a year to just train the bots and the avatars. So it's a very huge investment. So please note that, do you have the right ROI coming out from the metaverse? If yes, invest on it. The right ROI would be if you're doing volume hires, in the case of interviews, for example, if you're doing volume hires and volume virtual tours, maybe it makes sense. But if your volumes are low, then it's just something which helps in branding. And, so be wise and careful about how much do you invest and where do you invest in the metaverse world. I mean, nothing much has changed there, has it? I mean, I just be doing a lot of cliched answers here. They still need to be skilling themselves. They need to come ready with, what they want to deliver. The good thing is, but you have to look at it in a persona ways. You have to look at freshers and experienced professionals differently, and the C-suite differently. The freshers or the people who are just entering, the corporate ladder, I think they come these days with a lot of internship experience and things like that. So they do come prepared. And a working experience guy, I mean, they know what they have to do. So those skills are there, but the core skills which are going to impact the role that you join for. But what I've noticed, okay, a lot of time is that even with all the fancy talk on digital and all of that, minus the fresher lot, minus the Gen Zs and the others, when I look at the mid and the senior level, okay, digital skills still haven't got there where they need to be. So my one word of advice is that employees who are coming at the mid and the senior, okay, will have to apply creativity, critical thinking, constant digital upskilling to solve complex problems in an organization, when you join. The digital economy demands new ideas, information, business models that continually are expanding. You're combine and shift into new ventures. So there's a lot that's going on. So in the absence of those skills, I think it'll be difficult. I'm just give you an example. I mean, are you on the design thinking? Do you understand agile? Do you still a waterfall? So all of these are questions that are asked, irrespective of whether you're coming into tech or a non-tech role. I think employees must consistently refresh their digital dexterity. I mean, that's the most important piece. Okay, I don't think we have still got there. And I'm talking about after observing a lot of recruitments and a lot of things that are going around. The other is that ability to work with tech. Now you would see that I keep talking tech again and again, Rashmi, but the fact is that you talk about any organization, whether it's a hardcore manufacturing, ours is a hardcore manufacturing, but see the kind of tech that we use. There are pockets of resistance initially, but a lot of people today, they struggle if they haven't really, upskilled themselves on the tech. So you have to understand that tech is at the heart of everything that you do now. So ability to work with tech, and I call them smart machines, as you have to use smart machines as colleagues. Your tech is your colleague. And how can you work with that is an important piece. How do you do data modeling is an important piece. I mean, depending on the role, of course. So as I said, mid and senior, this is what your ask is. The freshers are definitely coming with a good amount of digital skills. They come with a lot of awareness. And at times, they kind of challenge the status quo in an organization, which is a great thing, because that's what you need in diversity, right? Diversity is not just about gender, it's also about generations. You want people to, challenge you, and that's how innovation is fueled. So that's pretty much it. And other than that, have a T-skill approach. You have a specialization in one and a horizontal kind of a skill set on the other. So that kind of gives the employer a lot of fluidity with you as a talent. Okay, and that's how work is going to be in the near future. It's actually right now happening exactly like that. If you've heard of agile, and if you've heard of squads, tribes, chapters, or if you've heard of team of teams, these are nothing but this is fluid talent. Today you're doing one role, but you could be doing 4, 5, 6 different kind of projects with different managers. That's how work is happening today. So T skills are extremely essential, and that's how you need to be preparing yourself. Everything that I spoke about for the last, whatever, 20 minutes, 30 minutes is actually all priorities for 2023, because we haven't done a great job in the year that we are currently. No, actually, that's wrong. It's not that we've not done a great job. I think we've started laying the foundation, the awareness has started happening. But I think when I see things like hashtag silent quitting, I get a little worried that, I would rather see a hashtag ONA, a hashtag metaverse, a hashtag blockchain. Those should be center stage right now. So I think the priorities are very much out there. Okay, I'll just summarize. So how are you looking at your HR transformation? Okay, I know that's my role, but then this is the transformation side of HR, is to say, how are you disrupting the traditional practices which are possibly not fit for future and making them future ready? And this is done by 3 areas or 3 pillars of action, PPT, like people, processes, and technology. And when I say people, it's about people capabilities to be future ready. Process re-engineering completely overall. If you think that the shelf life for 9 boxes is gone, then it's gone. So move on. There are many other things to look at. Okay. And then of course, tech, that how does tech, kind of be at the center stage for all this. So that's one, that how are you looking at the entire transformation? The second is a lot of HR leaders have started investing on their digital orchestration, the product stack, that if you have a Oracle or an SAP or a Workday or whatever, then how do you bring in the new age SaaS-based solutions on top of that? How do you create better experiences? That's another key thing that people start looking at. Organization network analysis is becoming bigger and bigger by the day. Okay, because that's the true diagnostic. I don't think there's anything better than ONA in the world of identifying the active and the passive networks, the inclusions, the communication networks, the center of influences. Everything comes out from ONA. Move from asking to listening, and that's where things like a lot of these listening tools and data study like sentiment analysis or mood boards, these become very important. If you're going and asking a question, how are you feeling today? If I go and ask one of my team members in the morning, if I'm the boss, I'm feeling very good. In the evening as well, they're good. But if they go and punch a thing on the mood board or something, the reality might be different. So asking to listening, and then of course, metaverse. Also, I think it's time to wake up to blockchain. Blockchain has an interesting use case in the talent acquisition field from a track and trace perspective. Okay, so do some reading there, because you have to start doing your research and your homework because it's going to come. Okay, 2 years, 3 years down the line, there'll be a lot of blockchain players who will be coming up with some solutions to empower your recruitment processes. So are you doing that? And of course, data lakes, cyber security, ESG, these are going to be the key things that I think HR leaders should focus on going forward, other than the stuff that I've already spoken about, like skills, COE, and all of that. The Gen Z is not a beast. Okay, they're no different. And I keep saying that Gen Z, I hate stereotyping. It's not about the age. My daughter thinks that I'm a millennial in a Z's body, in a Gen Z's body, because I think like that. Before you start handling, or I answer that what is the right way to handle the Gen Z or to retain them, first understand what they expect. Because if you know what they expect and if you're not delivering on them, that's it. They will not be staying around. So I think what they expect at the core of all of it is hyper personalization. All right. They expect instant gratification as well. It's exactly what you and I expect these days as well. I mean, we expect convenience. For example, you download an app, right? You stay with it for a couple of minutes. If you don't find what you're looking at, you never log into it again. And then there's another app that you download and you like it, then you stick to it. So, you give up and you stick at the same time. So these are some very interesting behaviors of a Gen Z and the workforce in general today. Then there is also a belief and a sense of purpose that these people carry, in the sense they want to be associated to a purpose around, I keep talking about my daughter because she's my best, case study for a Gen Z. I think, she goes to Starbucks more because Starbucks has a lot of charity and a lot of other, social initiatives that they do. And she associates herself to them. She's a great Greta Thunberg fan. There are a lot of these kind of things. So if your organization, now let me just summarize. If your organization is really serious about retaining Gen Z, think hyper-personalization. Therefore, think personas. Think personas in an organization. The policies that you have to make as an HR, Okay, gone are those days that HR makes the policies. I know you're going to get crazy when I say the next time. What you will see going forward, and it's actually happening now, is that HR policies are made by the people, for the people, of the people. Okay, and the way to do that is by doing personas, identifying what that persona needs, experiences, etc., and then creating a policy or wiring a policy around that. Therefore, you will have multiple policies around the same leave policies for different generations and different personas, not generation, but different personas. Just to give an evidence to my point here, if you are a 47-year-old person like myself, my key expectation from HR today possibly is my daughter's education or higher education. So can I fetch a loan? All right. But if somebody who's like a 21, 22, 23-year-old person who's joined an organization, their expectation is, do I get some vouchers on my birthday, which I can go ahead and spend? Or do I get an off on my birthday? Do I get a laptop when if I'm working from home? Do I get a pass for a work cafe if I can sit there and I can work and I don't have to come to the office? So the expectations are different. So I cannot have the same benefit structure for a persona like a Gen Z and a persona like a millennial. So, that's pretty much how you kind of wire it. You have to rethink HR policies, create personas in your organization, which are created out of many factors like socioeconomic background, education background, the systems that you use, the personality characteristics. You can read about it. I mean, it'll take me another 2 hours to just explain how personas are created. But typically in an organization, there are about 7 to 8 personas. And then all HR has to be wired around, different strokes for different folks, personalized for those personas. And that's the way to retain Gen Zs. Yeah, I think I answered this. You would have understood I'm no fan of longevity, but I do feel that, people have to contribute on a role. So everybody has an aspired role, and then they have a current role. In my case, I also talk about a moonshot role, like the second level of aspiration. I think the way to look at promotions is definitely to look at tenure, definitely look at performance, definitely look at all the other traditional factors that you've been looking at, but give it a weightage, create an algorithm around it, and give a higher weightage to the skills you have for the current role, skills you have for the aspired role. And the skills cannot be rated by a manager only. They have to be going through a proper assessment framework. Because if you're rating these skills by the manager, then again, it's back, nothing has changed really. So hey, listen, I'm not saying that all managers are bad, okay? I mean, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that biases exist. They exist everywhere. We are human beings at the end of the day. So a good way to take those biases away is by using numbers, by using data, by using science. So add that whole framework, give it an algorithm, add weightages around each of these factors, give a higher weightage to skills, and then decide whether this person needs to be promoted. The second factor that you have to decide is, if you're promoting somebody, does that person's succession exist? So it's not just one promotion. There is also a downside effect, right? There's a downstream effect, there's an upstream effect. So the downstream effect, you have to understand from a succession point of view, and how does the org therefore get shaken up? So all of these things come together to decide whether the person is ready for promotion. So just making it more scientific through the skills COE is what I was trying to do. I hope that answers your question. But yes, I mean, promotions and hikes, yeah, I mean, it's been there. Bell curve has been existed. There are a lot of companies which have done POCs around getting rid of bell curves so that, hikes can be more, democratic, and be everywhere. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of experience and, tenure in an organization, for sure. But the answer to that is establish the skill COE. Only then you can get rid of it. I mean, strategic business. I mean, don't ask me these questions that you can find on the Google, very honestly. Use this time for something more deeper. But yeah, I mean, you will find strategic business partnership is the way to go forward. HRBPs have been, they've been bamboozled with all the admin tasks. Fortunately, there are systems here at Rescue which take 70 to 80% of the admin task, which I call the non-value adds, away. So then what you're left with is strategic partnership. And therefore, if you want to get into strategic partnership with a business leader, you need to understand that business. Then you need to understand strategy. Then you need to understand workforce planning. Then you need to understand how does the workforce planning, impact the business value chain, So these are important skill sets that possibly, I'm not sure whether you can learn for all companies, all industries. A lot of this is research based, but the intent has to be wearing a business hat. So Summarizing this, have a lot of eye out for a business. So if, for example, if you were to come into biotechnology, or if you're going to pharma, which is my industry, or my ex-industry of retail, understand retail, understand the retail trends, then get into some basic, manpower planning scenarios. If you're just moving into this role, then get into, people handling and all of that. Not the other way around. Normally, we start with people handling. Okay, how do you handle people? And then I think the world has changed. People don't want to be handled anymore. Okay. I mean, if I tell you I want to handle you, would you like it? No, nobody likes to be sold. People like to buy, right? So people don't want to be handled anymore. People know what they have to do. Folks are intelligent enough. All they need is information. Now, how do you provide that? The second, layer of skills that you need to build is data. And I keep saying, in the absence of understanding data and the usage of data, and I'm not saying maths, data is not just numbers, data is also English. Okay, I spoke about NLP, I used that term somewhere back. Neuro-linguistic programming, there are tools available which read a sentence and then interpret that sentence. That is the person happy, sad, whatever. So these tools are existing, but how do you create the universe of data? So understand that, understand tech, understand marketing. HRBP is, or rather all HR is all tech and marketing. So these are 4-5 things. Now, if you really want to get into deep dive, just type, there's an interesting platform called AI HR. I don't know if you guys have ever explored that. It's got a lot of interesting learning programs for the new age HRBPs. I would strongly recommend, read that. Make Josh Person your guru. Josh Person, I call him, he's like my God, okay? So there are a lot of good thought leaders who would talk about what deep skills are needed. But it'll be in these layers, right? I hope that answers, yeah.
Sure, Vikas. Thank you so much. I have one last question. I think you have already answered this partially, but if you would like to add something more. So the question is, how should we handle the case of moonlighting while hiring?
Right, so again, I think you missed out my first 4-5 minutes. I was actually, in an implied sense, said that, don't want to talk about these fancy hashtags. Moonlighting is not new. Okay, there are a lot of videos, a lot of content. You can be on whatever side of the fence with your own opinions, but moonlighting has always been around. And in my view, moonlighting is staying. It's never going to go. But do you also have to look at moonlighting from only an external view? Can it not be an internal? So I keep saying that within the organization, how many gigs have you created? At the same time, if you're hiring an external candidate and there is no conflict of interest, which is like a moonlighting arrangement, a conflict of interest is not just a decision between you and the candidate. It is also a decision between you, the candidate, and the employer of that candidate. If all of that is smooth, there should not be a challenge. But wait for some time. I think it's not something that is just going to be let open in the air. There will be some legislations. I'm sure some organizations will start thinking about it. Conflict of interest is at the heart of the issue. That if I'm an HR guy today, and if I do HR transformation and whatever, and then I go to a competitor and I say, I'm going to do this every Saturday and Sunday for you as well. Guys, this is a conflict of interest. But if I have an interest in photography and I want to do a photography, kind of cover a wedding or something like that, there is no conflict of interest, and my organization should not have a problem with that. But understand, why do people do moonlighting? Okay, if you understand that, you can kill this whole conflict of interest business by creating those moonlight opportunities internally. Either people are bored of their role, they want more money, they want excitement. Give them that excitement internally. I mean, I've started saying this, that whatever events we do here, why do we hire photographers from outside? I'm sure we have photographers inside. Just make it like a gig, make it like a work, for 4 hours, pay money, get one of our own guys to do this. And for that matter, everything else. I needed somebody to make, a small little research paper. I found out, in R&D department, there's somebody who does a beautiful research paper. I contract that person every Saturday and Sunday for a month. We paid the money. The moonlighting opportunity exists within the organization. People will not have to go out. That's my 2 cents on it.
In the meantime, once again, thank you, Mr. Vikas, for this session. You have certainly given us a lot of insights on the trends and tips of recruiting and retaining top talent in 2023.